Southeast Asia SDG Youth Dialogue, Enhance Youth Activism in Implementing 2030 Agenda on Sustainable Development, which is part of the Asia Pacific Forum on Sustainable Development 2022. So the involvement of youth in policy making is believed to have a positive or enhanced impact to the society and to the world. But why and how? In this forum, we will find out more. And before we get to the event, I'd like to remind everyone to please mute yourself throughout the session unless invited to speak by members of the panel discussion. Should you have any questions, you could type them in the chat box, or alternatively, you can also keep your questions for the Q&A session. On top of that, dear members of participants, you are encouraged to constantly turn your videos on for better engagement and interaction. Towards the end of the event, we will share a survey link, and we would really appreciate if you would be willing to give us your feedback. So let's have a fun and impactful session. And last but not least, first, let's take a group photo while everyone is still fresh and excited for the event. Shall we? Technical team, are we okay? So I think we'll begin with, we'll do this in 3 batches. The first batch, we will invite all the youth panelists to turn on their camera first, so that you'll show up on the screen and we'll be able to take the photo. Is everyone okay with the technical team? Yeah, I think we're all ready here. Okay. Right, so these are the youth panelists. We'll have the youth panelist for the first batch. Dayat, are we good? Okay, done. Now, the second batch, we will invite all the UN partners to turn on their cameras. Are we ready? Just stand by with a smile, I guess. Are we good? Okay, hold on. I think we need to have like about 10 seconds of intervals for this. Let me know. All right, are we ready? 1, 2. Right. Technical team, are we good there? Okay, sorry. Wait, go, as in I'll take the second batch now? Now, go now for 2. Okay, sorry. Once again, I would like to invite all the UN partners to turn on your cameras so that we can be together in this photo session. Once again, okay, I think they're ready now. 1, 2, go. All right. Thank you very much. Now, this is for the rest of us. But again, I think we need a 10-second intervals for this. Okay. So the other participants, you may turn on your cameras for the group photo. Right, 1, 2, go. All right. Is that okay? Okay, perfect. Thank you very much. Thank you. Right, ladies and gentlemen, to begin with, the introductory remarks will be presented by Ms. Marisa Panyachiva, Partnership and Development Finance Officer, Office of the UN Resident Coordinator Office, Thailand. So Marisa has 15 years of UN experience in developing partnerships and capacity development strategies and supporting program management at the regional level. A lawyer by background, Marisa has negotiated complex agreements with member states, facilitated intergovernmental meetings, and managed key partnerships, including with the private sector. Prior to joining the United Nations, Marissa was working in the private sector as a lawyer with Baker & McKenzie's Bangkok office. So ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Ms. Marissa Panyachiva.
Thank you, colleagues and friends, students from across Southeast Asia. It is a pleasure to join you today to discuss more effective youth engagement in the region. This theme has personal resonance for me. More than 20 years ago, I spent 2 months as a youth representative in the SHIP for Southeast Asian Cultural Exchange Program. Just in the last couple weeks, I've been reminded of that experience. First, during a conversation with the Japanese embassy, and then by meeting a professor at Nika University, who was also a participant. From the friends I made across Southeast Asia and the opportunity to learn from different points of view, it was really a life-changing experience. For the United Nations as a whole, youth engagement is a cross-cutting strategy and a work in progress. I appreciate the emphasis today on implementation and practical steps to make sure that we're making good on this commitment and that engagement is more than a buzzword or token inclusion. All of us have a lot to learn from the experiences and challenges faced by young people across the region, which makes it a privilege today to welcome our panel members from Indonesia, the Philippines, Thailand, and Vietnam, as well as the Swiss Embassy in Indonesia and the Australian Embassy in Thailand. With students and young people joining online from across Southeast Asia, it is also important that dialogue is a two-way street. Today, during the open session, we welcome your active participation and valuable insights and ideas to mobilize youth involvement in SDGs. I look forward to hearing about projects that are underway and new ideas and innovation for better youth participation, including good practices and innovative advocacy from UNDP and UNFPA's partnerships with young people. In these areas, young people such as yourselves have unique expertise and skills that we have to leverage for evidence-based policy and implementation. In advocacy, for example, youth activism and the school strike has emerged as among the most powerful forces for social and economic transformation. We see the impact of youth advocacy in Thailand as well, where youth-led campaigns are influencing public opinion and government policy on issues such as plastic pollution and food security for the most vulnerable. Youth-led research is often better at building trust and effective outreach, especially to other young people in vulnerable circumstances, that provides the basis for informed policy. At the heart of the UN's work in ASEAN is partnerships. The government, the private sector, civil society, with youth in all of your diversity, including marginalized people with disabilities, LGBTI, migrants, and stateless, the full range of our societies. This means leveraging the UN's convening power to bring together young people with member states and policymakers for inclusive decision-making, with today's meeting being a good example. Ahead of the Asia-Pacific Forum on Sustainable Development starting on Monday, these youth-centered planning sessions are essential to mobilize and jointly develop strategies to ensure that engagement with member states and decision makers is meaningful, co-led by young people, and leads to tangible results. I look forward to hearing your thoughts today and in follow-up sessions about good practices in ASEAN that work for youth engagement, barriers that remain, and how the UN can improve as a partner. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Marissa. Now, to the main agenda, a conversation with the youth achieving the Agenda 2030, time for more bottom-up approaches. A panel of youth will discuss and exchange views with UN agencies and partners on finding practical ways to meet the current challenges affecting the Southeast Asia region. And this dialogue will be moderated by Muhammad Hidayat Fahmi, chapter leader of the Young Seekers Malaysia. Hidayat is the chapter leader of the Young Seekers Malaysia, which is part of the regional TYS branding, a non-profit with the vision to bridge the young ASEAN generations to the rest of the ASEAN and China. Hidayat currently works in the multimedia and communications industry in Malaysia. Prior to this, he worked as a fundraising analyst in a CRM-based company after graduating as an arts English graduate from the University of Malaya. As an undergraduate, Hidayat has participated in various youth conferences and dialogues, including participating in a Model United Nations in Vietnam back in 2019. So ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Muhammad Hidayat Fahmi. Hidayat, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Bella. And again, a very warm welcome to everyone, and thank you for joining us on this lovely Friday evening. And of course, thank you, everyone. So before I start moderating this particular session, right, I would just like to briefly introduce all our panelists for today. But bear in mind, this is just going to be a very short two-liners for each panelist because, you know, the lengthier version, you may visit our website to find it out, right? But to proceed, maybe I can start with the youth side first. So first of all, we have Miss Monica Kamil Vigalang. So Nika is an advocate of youth empowerment and labor relations. She is a nation builder based in the Philippines, associated with several organizations such as Global Shapers Community, Manila Hub, and leads the Shape Philippines 2022, a voters education and civic engagement. All right, right up next, we have Ms. Shirley Ray from Indonesia. So Shirley is a young professional in tech with a keen interest in data privacy and cybersecurity in the digital era. She is currently an associate digital product manager at an Indonesian leading tech company. All right, up next, we have our members from Thailand, Ms. Siripon Raju. So Siripon, or also known as GIVE, is a Mafa Luan University Modern United Nations Club executive member for 2022. She was a Mole of Doi Ngam volunteer in 2020 and is now a staff member of the Mole of Doi Ngam volunteer. And following her, we have Mr. Matichai Tongpliu. So Matichai, or Mac, is a supporter of leadership in youth participation. He was awarded as Thailand National Outstanding Youth and has been part of the National Youth Supporter Forum under the Department of Children and Youth since 2020. So it's been 2 years, basically. And we have our young panel member from Vietnam, which is Ms. Jiahan Pham Vuy. So Jiahan is an active student researcher, entrepreneur, and a passionate sustainability advocate from Vietnam. Currently, she is the UNICEF ambassador and the Global Goals Club leader at the British International School, Hanoi. So those are your youth panelists. So right now I'm going to jump to the speakers. So the first one which would be on my list is Mr. Ralph. So Ralph is the Deputy Head of the Political Economy and Culture Division at the Embassy of Switzerland to Indonesia, Timor-Leste, and ASEAN. He's in charge of the embassy's work on ASEAN in the framework of the Switzerland-ASEAN Sectoral Dialogue Partnership. After that, we have Dr. Osa. So Dr. Osa's career spans more than 20 years, leading increasingly complex endeavors at country, regional, United Nations, academia, government, non-governmental organizations, and private sectors, and the list move along. She's currently the country director of UNFPA Thailand and is also the representative for UNFPA Malaysia. Right, up next, we have Mr. Reynold Mayer. So Reynold started his assignment as UNDP resident representative to Thailand on 26 March 2019. So coming from Nepal, where he was the UNDP country director since January 2015. Prior to that, Reynold served as senior deputy country director for UNDP Afghanistan. And last but not least, we have Ms. Nicole Lowry. So Nicole is the second secretary in development in the Australian Embassy in Bangkok. She works on the Mekong Australia Partnership Water Energy Climate Program to support countries to address water security, climate change, and the energy transition in the Mekong sub-region. So there we go, the introductions in a brief, right? Let's not waste our time and let's just straight away kick into this panel discussion, which I believe will be very much fruitful in observing the achievement of the youth involvement for SDG, right? So so the first part will be more like an introduction just to understand the work that they do. And this will be, I'm going to address this question to the youth panelists first by order. All right, so the first question will be for the youth panelists. Please briefly introduce yourself, very briefly, and share with us the SDG that you best relates to. All right, so this shouldn't take more than 2 minutes, particularly because we wanted to save time, but let us welcome our first panelist to talk today, which is Miss Nika from the Philippines.
Okay, thank you, Diet, for that introduction. So yeah, like what Diet said, you can just call me Nika, and I'm a global shaper under Global Shapers Community Manila Hub, and it's an initiative of the World Economic Forum. And by profession, I'm an HR practitioner here in the Philippines. So currently, what Diet mentioned as well, I advocate for youth empowerment. So right now, what I do is I currently lead a project. We call it Shape Philippines 2022. It's a youth-led voter and civic education initiative that aimed at empowering communities to vote wisely. So specifically, the current SDG and focused area that I'm interested in is in SDG number 4. It's quality education, because currently the quality of education here in my country is a bit alarming, especially since misinformation and disinformation are everywhere. So like even a teenager can believe right away, especially that you can easily access a social media. So that's why quality of education, in a sense that we can promote critical thinking and fact checking as early as they get into junior high school. So yeah, that's all for me.
Thanks, Nika. That's very interesting indeed, right? When we talk about misinformation and disinformation, we'll talk further after this on that particular topic. But now let us welcome Miss Shirley from Indonesia.
Yeah. Hi, thank you, Dayat. So my name is Shirley, and I'm currently in Jakarta right now. And outside my work, I'm also part of the youth organizations. I'm currently part of the Bringing European Together associations in Belgium. And yeah, I've been involving in a lot of youth organizations in Asia, Australia, as well as Europe. And I would like to focus on SDG number 4, which is quality um, educations with focus area in digital information security. And yeah, I think my main focus is basically on strengthening and promoting youth involvement in policy and decision making process. Thanks, Hidayat.
Thanks, Shirley. That's very lovely. So now may I invite Ms. Siripon to continue on with the flow?
Okay, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Siripon Raju. I am currently as part of program Following University is Model United Nation as executive members. I would like to focus on SDG number 5, especially in women voice in communities, because I have experience in the volunteer program in Chiang Rai province. It is the social project that we are going to organize activities with the children in remote area, and we are also going to make the activities with the people in local communities. We are trying to organize activity that can empowerment, especially those living in remote areas. I would like to give them a voice and make sure that they observe their life, as my plan is to form a club for women. Thank you. That's all for me.
Thank you, Siri. So now may we get Mr. Matichai?
Okay, so good afternoon, everyone. My name is Medichai Tongpleo, and I am currently part of a program Youth Volunteer from the Department of Youth and Children, Thailand. So today it is a pleasure for me to speak as a panelist in this event from Thailand's perspective. So the focus area or the SDG that I would like to talk about is the SDG for quality education, as Cherry and Monica as well. So I would like to talk about specifically about the gaps in the education framework, because I see that the challenge that youth most face, that lack of expression, participation, and low learning outcome in academics and skills. So as my past experience, most of my initiatives that I'm involved with are educational development. I used to organize activities and programs that prepare students to graduate or having the knowledge or skills that they will have to after graduation. So moreover, as the role of program of the youth volunteer under the Department of Youth and Children Thailand, I used to contribute to my local community to books donation. And lastly, I will talk about my passion. So I'm passionate about education because education is the fundamental function in sustainable development. So I think that if without education, there is no development in youth advancement. Thank you.
Thanks, Matty Chai. Yeah, we are going to be very interested in talking further on your past experience in terms of educational development, right? But for now, let us now proceed to our last youth panelist, which is Miss Chia from from Vietnam. Sorry, Jia. Jiahan, I don't think I can hear you, but I'm not sure if that's me.
Yeah, no voice. Yeah, you're right.
No voice, right? Okay, thank you for confirming. Jiahan, maybe you can check your audio again. Yes, we can't. But no worries. We'll give you some time to sort it out. So we'll just move on along to the speakers, and hopefully by the end of the turn, your audio will be fixed, right? So take your time to solve it out. So now, speakers, for the speaker session, I would like to invite Mr. Ralph to actually address this particular question. So it's the same thing, same questions for this introduction part, but the question for the speakers will be slightly different. So the question goes like this. Can you share with us about your organization? So particularly for Mr. Ralph, for example, you are currently in the Embassy of Switzerland in Indonesia, right? So can you share with us on your organization and then your role in it? So if I may welcome Mr. Ralph to start off with.
Thank you very much, Hidayat, and good afternoon, everyone. It's a pleasure to be part of this dialogue this afternoon, and I look forward because it really promises to be very interactive. So my name is Ralph. I'm working at the Swiss Embassy to Indonesia, to Timor-Leste, and to ASEAN. So we have three heads, and I think I represent these three heads well because I'm in charge of Switzerland's relations with ASEAN, with the Association of Southeast Asian Nations, whose secretariat is in Jakarta, right? So this is why we do this from Jakarta. But I'm also working on the peace and human rights portfolio of our embassy to Indonesia, so bilaterally. And there we support, for example, now I relate to the theme of today, we support human rights schools for students who are interested in, in working for the promotion of human rights, protecting human rights, reporting on abuses and so on. So this is my second head, the Indonesia head, and I also work on Timor-Leste. So we covered Timor-Leste out of Jakarta. This is the third so to say of our constituents where we represent the Swiss government.
All right, thanks, Ralph. That's very interesting indeed, right? Especially since you're also doing work in Timor-Leste. We might want to know more about that later on, right? So after this, maybe I can now invite Dr. Osa to answer the same question. Can you share with us about your organization and your role in it?
Good morning, everyone. I am really glad to see you here on the screen this afternoon. And it is such a pleasure to know that you are this engaged cohort who is ready and excited about reaching the Sustainable Development Goals. My name is Åsa Torkelsson, and I'm the representative of UNFPA to Malaysia and country director for UNFPA in Thailand. UNFPA is the United Nations Reproductive Health Agency, and we are very committed on particularly 3 issues, which we know are at the heart of the interest of you. And number 1 is to eliminate any preventable maternal death. And the second one is that there shall be no unmet need for family planning. Namely, we want to make sure that everyone has the reproductive choices that you wish to have to lead your life productively, as productively as possible. And the third one is to eliminate gender-based violence, which is a very high target in every country and the countries that I'm working in. And we are very keen on seeing how we can work with you, to hear from you some good ideas on how we can make sure to continue to propel everyone's safety in the region. So I'm really excited and looking forward to hearing your good ideas today. Thank you.
Yes, exactly. Thank you, Dr. Osa. So that's really what we're looking for today, particularly in terms of that youth engagement, right, between the youth panelists and also the more of like the experts in this kind of situation, such as the speakers. And now, moving on, can we have Mr. Reynold to actually continue on the flow? So it's exactly the same question, Mr. Reynold.
Thank you so much, Hidayat, and a very good afternoon to everyone. A pleasure to join you all, the young people and the less young people on the screen. I think that's very important that we don't limit this only to one category, but it's the whole mix that I think will drive this forward. I'm the representative of UNDP here in Thailand, have been in Asia for the past 15 years. And I think over the years, what we see is an increasing engagement with young people in Thailand, but also in the other countries I've served, for the obvious reason that today and more young people with better access to education, better access to experience, and such a strong network online and offline, and exposure, to a broader area of issues, their appetite, not only to take part, but to lead and to have a voice in the decisions that affect their lives in the future that's ahead of them. They want to be part of this. And I think as a development organization, we owe it to them to ensure that there is space for them in the discourse, but also in the decision-making process. So this is very much the angle that we're taking here in Thailand. The role of UNDP, to put it simply, is to accompany Thailand in the achievement of the SDGs as a member state of the UN, a goal that, of course, I share with all my UN colleagues here also based in Thailand. And to do this, we want to provide a platform for young people to take part in this effort. Now, of course, it's work. But this is what amazes me with young people. It's their dynamism, their creativity, and their enthusiasm. So what we try to do is to channel with them this enthusiasm and help them translate it into very constructive inputs in whether it's the legislation or it's concrete action on the ground, but also with the understanding that, especially in a country like Thailand that also faces an aging situation, and Asa knows this very, very well also, is to look at intergenerational discussions, right? So that it's not just youth in abstract and in silo, but it's youth cutting across the whole society. So what we do with the youth is not for us to define, it's for the youth themselves to tell us, what area they want to engage. Our role is to play this intermediary between the decision makers and the young people, and to make sure that space and voice is given to the young people in Bangkok, but also in more rural, more isolated places of the country, so that the whole young generation gets a seat at the table for the decisions that will affect them. I'll be happy to unpack this a bit more as we go forward through this dialogue, but a great pleasure to be with you all this afternoon. Thanks. Back to you, Hidayat.
Thanks, Mr. Reynold. And I really agree, basically. So when we talk about youth participation, right, it's not only about the youth taking actions, it's also the needs to gain the kind of inputs from the more expert people who are usually, a bit older, right? Because that's how we gain experience. So that's really the purpose, of having this kind of ecosystem where each community can support one another. All right, so last in the speakers list will be Miss Nicolari. So on to you, Miss Nicole.
Thank you all, and thank you for inviting me today. It's been very exciting to hear all of your backgrounds and what SDGs you're interested in discussing today too. So I'm looking forward to the discussion part after this as well. But yes, I'm based in the Australian Embassy in Bangkok, Thailand, and we are here as a development partner to the region. We work bilaterally with Thailand here, but we're also running regional development cooperation programs and working with partners across the region. So our Partnerships for Infrastructure program is helping create solutions to infrastructure problems across Southeast Asia. And the program I'm working on is the Mekong Australia Partnership, which is one with Mekong countries. So working with Thailand, Vietnam, Laos and Cambodia on a lot of their challenges, especially after COVID-19 and the recovery efforts. So we're partnering with those 4 countries in the Mekong region. I'm working on the water, energy, climate components, but we also have other pillars under our partnership. One is on trade and investment, cyber and critical technology, trade and investment, and building human capacity. So under building human capacity, we do work towards the SDG of quality education and providing scholarships to people, especially the youth, and providing those advanced career opportunities, because young generation are our future leaders, and we see that as a really useful and tangible way of being able to benefit youth in the region. I'm happy to talk about any of those as we go into the discussion, so thank you.
Right. Surely we'll be able to talk about that after this, right? But before we jump into that in-depth discussion, remember we still have Jihan to actually introduce. So if your audio is okay, Jihan, maybe you can take the floor for now.
With this, so I will talk to my phone. Apologies for this inconvenience, but hi everyone. My name is Zahan from Vietnam. I'm a UNICEF ambassador for my institution. I work with UNICEF representatives to develop awareness-raising campaigns and action plans on Goal 11, Sustainable Cities and Communities in Vietnam and Southeast Asia. Having witnessed the problems of environmental waste, overcrowded housing conditions, and slummification in Vietnam, I'm committed to use my research to propose sustainable, inclusive, and resilient city planning.
All right, sorry, I thought you still have something to talk about. All right, thanks, Johan. So now, since now we already got to know what the speakers and panelists are currently doing, basically, right? So let us dive into this particular dialogue that we want to have in terms of like engaging and interacting between these youth panelists and also the speakers to understand further how we can all achieve this SDG 30 through youth participation. But we just like to remind the floor that if you have any questions, please feel free to input them inside the chat box, right? We will try to arrange our time properly to try and address that if we have further remaining time. But to start it off, this discussion thing. So this discussion that we're going to have is more going to be like on dialogue, right? So let me just like remind everyone on the floor, it's not scripted, particularly. I can vouch for that. So it's not scripted. So it's going to be more like an open flow. We'll see how this goes along. But I will start with one question, the panelists, and we hope we can move forward from there, right? So the first person that I want to direct this question to is Miss Shirley. All right, so Miss Shirley, as a youth advocate, right? So particularly when you mentioned that you are very interested in information security, and of course you are working in a tech company also. So I just wanted to ask, like, as a youth advocate yourself, when you're trying to promote or empower this kind of like SDG that you believe in, what are the issues that you can observe pertaining to this aspect of information security, especially Indonesia, or if you can provide a more global update, that will be fine as well. So maybe Shirley, if you can start with that.
Thank you, Hidayat. Yeah, in terms of issues that I've seen and experienced, I think Indonesia, especially during the pandemic, right? Not only Indonesia but also in global level, more people have begun studying, for example, working and also doing shopping online, and I've been witnessing an increase in the level of data breach and also like data leaks and like scams that happens online, which I think it's great, poses a great danger to society and also national security, which is highly interesting because back when I was still studying undergraduate studies in 2018, I was part of this community called Foreign Policy Community for Indonesia. So we did an initiative back then in 2018 in which we gather Indonesian students. So it's a conference called Indonesian Congress on Indonesian Diaspora Youth. So I gather Indonesian students and also academia to formulate a policy brief to Indonesia 2015 visions, and I was responsible for a security committee. So we worked with experts in which the expert told me that, you're working with security issues, and then I have to elaborate more on what kind of security, and I do some kind of like non-traditional security approach, which is cybersecurity, right? So I, design the comedy, and then we ended up with the action plan that we designed. Hopefully we could improve the security and resilience of national infrastructures as well as services, right? And the output that we've created was submitted to Indonesian legislative in 2018, and currently I'm working with youth from Europe and Asia to create the same, but not only in Indonesian level, but also with the youth from Europe as well. So yeah, I think if we are talking about the most effective kind of participations, I think it's more of a like expert initiated, but like youth working as a support in which, they just like give us a theme, and then we can definitely develop it and create our own decisions and then, implement that. Back to you, Dayat.
All right, thank you. Thank you for that, Shirley. So I guess when we talk about this, right, I just wanted to maybe like go ask Dr. Osas a question, particularly to say. So Dr. Osa, like in your expertise, in your particular involvement in United Nations previously, what would you say is the best approach to actually, educate, especially the youth side, to actually understand on a particular issue? What would be some of your recommendations from your past observation in this regards?
Thank you so much for the good question you are asking. It's a question we ask ourselves actually every day. How can we be more effective in the work that we do? How can we make sure that everything that we do actually meet the needs that you have and that the future generations will have in terms of reaching the SDGs? So there are many pathways for us in our engagement, and I've worked across multiple countries. I think one of the important approaches for UNFPA, which I wish to remind you, is the United Nations Reproductive Health Agency, is that we work a lot of comprehensive sexuality education. And one of the important avenues for that work is to actually develop curricula that we can include in schools. And so to be able to present youth with their reproductive health choices at an early stage. In some countries where there are also challenges in terms of child marriage, for example, this is a very important entry point to make sure that we can build the awareness of how we can actually avoid child marriage and invest in girls, women's education, and also make sure that men and all the men in this call, you are allies to the empowerment of women and girls. So for us, the comprehensive sexuality education, where we engage also with teachers, with parents, and of course in teen clubs, have been important ways for us to engage with youth. In Thailand specifically, we are also now piloting to move the clubs, the teen clubs, to virtual spaces so that we can really roll out the information about the sexual and reproductive health choices that are there for you to use, and have two-way communication, namely to hear from you the feedback on the teen clubs. In Thailand, we are implementing them together with the Department of Health, and they are mostly virtual. And in some instances, and for some groups of the population, we also have real life meeting clubs. So we are very keen to hear from you, your feedback on whether these are good avenues for you, if there are ways in which we can modify, adapt them to better suit your needs. So I'll be looking forward to hear that from you. And thank you for giving me this opportunity.
Thanks, Dr. Osa. Right, so maybe we can just simply address the question that Dr. Osa pointed out in her last statement, right? So particularly, if I may summarize it, it's basically what do youth feel in terms of the communications that the opportunities that you come across with, right? And I just want to address to Ms. Nika, because Ms. Nika is particularly interested in voters' education. So when you talk about education, I would just like to know, in the context of Philippines, what are basically happening right now when you advocate for this voters education. So I think that kind of relates with what Dr. Osa is trying to find out, especially in like how do youth views all these communications, or maybe the public service announcements. How is it currently going on? What's happening in the Philippines? If you can please kindly enlighten us on that aspect, Ms. Nika.
Okay, thank you for that, Hidayat. So yeah, currently it's the Philippine election season. That's why our project focused on the voters' education, wherein part of the content is the misinformation and disinformation. And as we all know, it's not the Philippines who only suffers from fake news, no, but also other countries as well. So recently we organized a nationwide online webinar, and we called it Shape Philippine Summit, wherein we invited speakers from different organizations. And one of our sessions actually is like what I've mentioned, it's about misinformation and disinformation on elections, wherein the objectives of this session is to, of course, first is to how to spotlight the misinformation. Second is to how to become a responsible social media user this elections, how to combat disinformation, and of course, identifying fake news. And so far, we have hundreds of delegates who attended to this summit. And for this specific project, actually, it's really a big project actually. So we have implementation approach, and that is to first to empower the youth, wherein we empower them with the tools that we will provide offline and online voters education and civic engagement tools. Second, of course, is to empower the communities, wherein we go to the marginalized communities, wherein we conduct voters education face-to-face, limited face-to-face though. And third is, of course, to spread the message, wherein we work with media partners to create content in combating misinformation and disinformation to different channels. And good thing that several media here in the Philippines are already practicing that. Like whenever there's a news published, they will post specifically for fact checking that is this news really relative, or is this news is a fake news, something like that. So yeah. Back to you, Dayat.
Thanks. That's very interesting. Because like obviously, as you mentioned, fake news happens everywhere. Particularly, I'm actually working on that side of as well, so I know how bad fake news is, right? So although we have all this, like the government's act or government's law, particularly that still doesn't really solve the problem. So we need like a proper guideline for this particularly. And I know that there has been research that takes more in a regional context and also global context to address this, but still at the moment it's still pretty severe, especially I would say in the Southeast Asia region, right? So maybe let's hopefully we'll make do, we'll find something to work on this particularly, right? So to continue on this question, maybe I can address Mr. Ralph, right? So obviously in the context of like, you know, there are organizations that tries to mitigate a certain issue, a certain problem, right? But from your aspect, what would be some of the challenges that you face when you try to plan and implement a youth-led initiative? Because I'm well aware that you also have your particular initiative, which you may want to share further after this, but maybe just to start off the conversation, Mr. Ralph, passing over to you.
Thank you very much for the question on the challenges. I think we already heard a couple of key ingredients for a successful youth initiative, and one of them is knowledge, expertise. I think it's key for, and that's probably the most important asset that youth can bring in is expertise, and that will give them credibility, because they lack the social standing, right, of a politician or of a ministry official or of a big NGO, international NGO leader, but they have expertise. They know their region. They know the problems in their region, and I think that's the area where they can you know, start working on. I can mention two examples. One area where Switzerland is working on, and which has not really come up yet, is climate change and disaster risk reduction. So when I think about youth activism in Switzerland, the first topic that would come up is climate change. It's Friday today, and it's Fridays for Future Day again. So I think this was the issue that has mobilized youth in Switzerland the most. And we are currently, the Swiss government, our development cooperation agency is running a campaign. It's called 1 Million Youth Action Challenge, 1myac.org. You can check it out. One challenge is actually to get the ideas, to get the young people to step up and say, I want to do something, I want to work on this issue. So by creating this challenge, you know, we tried to create incentives for youth all around the world, youth from different countries also to come together to do collaborative projects and to step up and get their brains together, their creative ideas, and work on the topic. I think another on a second point, when it comes to civic engagement in a more political space, of course, in many countries, the civic space is quite restricted. It's not easy to express opinions. It's not easy to get together to engage, you know, because the expression is restricted, or because young people are not, the opinions of young people are not how to say, not heard or not respected, because, you know, they're young people, they don't understand what's going on, right? There are different kinds of challenges that young people face, and there's one project that Switzerland supports in Cambodia. It's called Support to Stimulating Participation and Civic Engagement, and it tries to get Cambodian youth together and to get them engaged through the medium of film. So focus on take an art medium, in this case film, focus on certain issues and start talking about these issues and start, you know, getting together, associating and discussing this issue, building a certain momentum around it and bringing it up, and thereby also highlighting actually there's something is you know, there are important ideas coming up from the bottom, and they should also be heard.
Thanks, Mr. Ralph. That's very interesting, actually. So some of the things that I can capture just now, right, it's the idea of putting a focus on what you're trying to solve first, right, and then having a collaboration, and then after that, obviously, you know, to start and step up to try and solve that particular issue, and this actually leads me to the next youth panelist which I would like to invite, right, because she's just for your context, she's very someone that has work on the idea of collaborations, and that would be none other than Miss Jia Han herself. So maybe if you can share with the floor on some of the things that you have done, how you started kicking up things, because I know you involve a lots of collaboration, right? Particularly, so how do you do that? How do you step up as a youth, as a very, very young youth, particularly? What gives you the courage or the interest to actually kickstart that? So, Miss Jia, the floor is yours. Okay, yeah, she will open the audio from her phone.
Yeah. Thank you, Dayat. And I think one of the motivation for me, it was actually the same thing that Dr. Ralph said about increase in cross collaboration. So I reach out. So in our institution, we have a North Anglia network which connects 50 different international schools and institutions, particularly over Southeast Asia and Europe as well. And what I did was I reached out to student leaders in other schools to organize a massive campaign on sustainable cities, where we have a lot of we have on not only conferences but also a podcast, as well as a competition where youths can post different versions of the of sustainable city under the hashtag of future cities, and that was the reason why we increased a lot of trainings, a lot of cross-sharing of resources and knowledge that I think can also be applied to this conference as well. So after this conference, I think it will be a great platform to continue to connect with student leaders to each other, and also from UN representatives with our student youth as well. Yeah, so that was how I was able to do a lot of awareness campaign to impact my region.
Thanks, Jahan. All right. So I think the key point here is having that kind of connections. But again, it's easier said than done, to be honest, right? Because I know a lot of other youth who are not capable to do things like what Miss Jahan did, right? So maybe they need a kind of support. So maybe if I can invite Mr. Reynold to actually share with us, what kind of support have your organizations done in the past, or what are you currently planning to do in terms of providing supports to connect all these young youth leaders from these different communities, right? Is there any plan in motion? Maybe if you can share with us, the audience today.
Thanks, Hidayat. I can't resist to actually use the technical difficulties that Jian is facing, because to me the way that she is being able to find innovative solutions to fix this shows the creativity and the determination with which she is displaying this capacity is precisely what is a huge motivator for us here in UNDP to engage more and more with youth, because we are in awe in front of this enthusiasm always. We have because at some point we also need to be structured and offer platforms that are efficient. So we've developed for the past year and a half here in UNDP Thailand a youth engagement strategy around three main pillars. One is civic engagement of young people, right, which is really about giving them this voice in the decision-making process, whether it's at national level, working with parliament, making sure that MPs, who vote budgets, who reform the legislative agenda, are informed, not with concepts and with good intentions, but with the realities that young people face day by day in society. So engaging them on platforms where they physically meet and discuss. And the appetite, sometimes transfers from the young people, always very impressed to go to parliament, but the MPs themselves, they want more, because they realize that sometimes they have preconceived ideas of what the reality of young people is, right? So there is really this engagement around civic responsibilities, of course, through also local elections, through the Sangdikbayan that I think Nika can speak to, which is this idea of having young local elected youth representative in municipalities, in barangay in the Philippines, how the model, we learn from that model, and we try to involve this also in a country like Thailand. So a lot of engagements behind this political space ultimately, because they are active citizens and they need and have their voice to be heard. The second pillar is on economic empowerment, right? Because of course it's great to have good ideas and wanting, but we also need to, as you rightly said, Hidayat, need to make sure that the basic fundamental needs of having an income, of having livelihoods, of being able to afford, an education or tertiary education to really lift, in society. And of course, today this is very much needed, is available for young people, right? So this economic empowerment, and we try to connect it still to the civic engagement, meaning that what we've seen work very, very well is offering social innovation approaches and accompanying those that really have the ability and the great ideas, but sometimes they lack the networks, they lack access to startup financing. And what we do is we transform the social innovation into social enterprises. And this model of a social enterprise really fits very nicely with the spirit of young people in today's society. Of course, they have to, make ends meet and be beneficial, derive profit from the company, but not profit for profit for reinvestment in societies on good issues. The whole concept of being able to do well by doing good to society, and how we reconcile, what for too long we have seen as sometimes being presented as contradictory, right? No, we try to show how prosperity is actually a very positive enabler, right, to the engagement of young people in society. And the third pillar and the last pillar, it's really to help young people become true champions for the SDGs, right? So the idea is to move away from working for young people to working with young people and involve them in the design of the activities. And that's why I was saying earlier that, ultimately they shape the agenda. We only offer a platform, we offer facilitation tools, we coach them on how to do this, but ultimately what we want is for us to be there, just for them to really gain this independence of action and gain the confidence, the strength, and sometimes even also the leadership skills that they need to demonstrate to engage with mayors at the local level, to engage with MPs in parliament, to engage in the CEOs of the big listed companies, to create the space they want and that they deserve in society. So it's really this profound engagement around the three pillars, and around those three pillars then we have activities and programs. One that is, I mentioned this one because it's valid for a multiple number of countries in the region, is Youth Collab, which we run in Vietnam, which we run in Indonesia. And the concept is really about social innovation to bring those young people to the fore and accompany them in that transformation from social innovation to social entrepreneurs. There are many other activities, but I would encourage the young people who are listening to us today, if they want to know more, just follow us on our social media and come to our website, and we have a lot of information there on how they can engage. Thanks, Hidayat.
Thanks, Mr. Reynold, for sharing all of those. So again, the idea is that there's always opportunities, right? So you just need to further explore on it. You just need to get the correct people and get to know them, because they will share you lots of different opportunities. So that's the idea and basis of all. So just to try and put a new angle to this, right? I would like to ask a question to Mr. Matty Chai, particularly because I'm interested when he says he was involved in educational development previously. So if I may get Mr. Matty Chai to also share with us in Thailand, what have you been doing to actually address this education gap, as you mentioned, right? Because just to relate back with what Mr. Reynold mentioned just now, he said that there's also like a lack of confidence by the youth in being more involved in for youth by youth kind of initiative. So Mr. Maticha, if you can share with us the kind of like education development work that you've been doing previously, and what would some of the possible solutions that you have.
Thank you, Mr. Hidayat. So I also agree with Mr. Reynold that that about the youth engagement, because I currently study in the social innovation, which is I am looking forward to have more the spaces or the platform that can be building the better society with the youth engagement and civic engagement. So as my past experience, I used to organize programs and activities like the establish of the intensive English program and multicultural integrated camp, which is bring youth to participate and engage to contribute their skills and their learning outcome by providing the opportunity for them. So I came up with the idea to practice them and have the idea to look further to their and training and more participation in society by establish the club, because I used to establish the club and activity for them to collaborate with local government in my local area, which is Phetchabun Provincial Education Office and the Secondary Education Service Office Phetchabun area. So this aim to focus quality education, which is narrowing the gaps in education framework and find a solution to hear the voice of youth, to come up with a decision and how they can think about educational plan, and also the framework for their department to achieve SDG. And lastly, in the club that I established is they will have a camp for them to practice their life and work skills like leadership, and also the communication, critical thinking, because I advocate them to be student-centered study, which is I think it is important is nowadays in the 21st century, and I will monitor this progress advance. Yes, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Matichai. So we got question on the chat, right? So keep them coming. We'll try to address it. I know we're really short on time. Sorry, my Zoom pop up, right? So I was like so scared I was logged out. But this is Microsoft Teams, so that's fine. Yeah, because going on, I would still like to hand the question over to Miss Nicole, but maybe this is not the correct question. So maybe my questions to Miss Nicole for this is that, we get insights particularly from the people of this region, right, through the youth panelists. But Miss Nicole, coming from Australia, and you're working in the Australia Embassy, right? Maybe my question to you is, what has the embassy done or is currently planning in fostering relationship between the Australian youth with the Southeast Asian youth? How do you bridge that kind of gap, right? So I may pass the floor to you, Miss Nicole.
Thank you, and thank you for the good discussion with everyone and all the youth panelists. I've been furiously writing notes because they've all been really interesting to hear all of your experiences and ideas. And I was struck by the idea of expertise and everyone being passionate about a particular SDG, using their expertise in this particular area and their passion that they're bringing to each of their projects. That's been really great to see, and how you can turn that passion into innovation to make practical change. I found that to be really interesting. Thank you. And I was really thinking about the ways that we engage with youth. And I think most of the work we do, it just depends on particular challenges. So we don't have a particular youth strategy. what sector we're working on, we'll come up with an idea for that particular sector. But partnerships is a big part of everything we do, and bringing people together from different organisations and different sides of the coins. So things like this are great because we're pulling together UN partners, youth with embassies like us in Switzerland. One particular project we're working on and we will be implementing soon is on plastics, and that will be bringing together everyone in the region, private sector, government partners, academia and entrepreneurs on what we can do to face the big plastic challenges we're facing. And I think those opportunities where you bring people together to collaborate on some of these challenges is a great way for youth to participate and also be connected with other relevant partners. Another example I had was some work I did in Solomon Islands. It was just an interesting way of engaging with youth, and it was through theatre. And so people were able to create stories and share their experiences through theatre. And I just thought that was a really innovative way to engage and share messages as well. So that's something I love about working with youth too. There's always some really great new ideas, innovative ideas that we sometimes don't think of when we're sitting behind our desks at work. So it's always great to have those new ideas coming forward. Thank you. I'll leave it there because I know we are running short of time.
Thanks, Nicole. Yeah, we're really running short of time, but I have been informed that we can actually extend it for a bit, like maybe 10 minutes. So please, we will encourage you to stay because we haven't even addressed one question from the floor yet. But yeah, before we try to address that, maybe let us have Miss Siripon to actually talk about, just now we've been talking about like different communication or different approaches, right? Especially the ideas that was brought by the youth in terms of this like creative approaches to communicate with the audience. So maybe in regards to what Miss Siripon is currently doing, right? May I get your input on in the context of Thailand? How do the youth there reacts to this kind of like participation? Are they very involved, or are they like not really involved because of what particular reason? So maybe if you can share that with us, that would be great. And also while you're doing that, just share with us of your past experiences in terms of, solving, promoting the SDG that you really believe in. So Ms. Siripon.
Okay, thank you, Hidayat. For the problem that I see in Thailand, most of women cannot be more participate in the activities, and when have the activities, men will be chosen first and chosen as the leader, and women cannot and and they have less opportunity to be the participation in the activities, or cannot express your idea or opinion with that they want to do. And for my suggestion, I would like to inform the club for women that I have decided the objective for the club is to provide the opportunity for women to engage the activities, aptitudes and interests, and to promote and support the role of women, and to organize the activity with the local community to express potential of women, and to find the solution that to find the solution that women they have facing, and to add some space for women that they can speak or they think. And for the activity will be in the class for first discussion and express and discuss and exchange their problem that women face, and second they will be training the law of women, rights of women, and the way to solve the problem that in inequality. Third, give women the opportunity to suggest activity that they would like to do, and do activity with the local community for the participation of women. And the last, have the organize meeting within the club to monitor the progress in advance. That is for my suggestion. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Siripon. Because you're talking about women empowerment, right? I'm actually intrigued to invite Dr. Osa to actually add on this kind of like this kind of like question. Sorry, if I may rephrase. Maybe Dr. Osa, you can add on the kind of training that you do from the UNFPA side, right? In terms of advocating for women empowerment. So I believe you will have this kind of like training or whatever it is campaign, right? So how does that look like during the pandemic, particularly to say, right? So how does that affect the level of participation from this women youth especially? So maybe Dr. Osa?
Thank you so much, and I was really glad to hear this perspective coming out loud and clear from you. And thank you for allowing me to elaborate a bit more on this important priority for UNFPA. So, as I mentioned, our focus is on ending gender-based violence. But of course, what we can see is also the economic empowerment of women is also helping to minimize the exposure to gender-based violence, because you can also be more able to decide on your life choices, and it can enable a lower degree of dependency. So for example, what we are seeing, and we have done an important study now in Malaysia, is, for example, that women's labor force participation is very low in Malaysia, and it's among the lowest in the ASEAN. So right now, then, we are trying to figure out what is the challenge, what are the challenges that we can, for example, work with the government to address. Maybe it's around the availability of childcare. Maybe there are other factors that make it more difficult for women to be engaged in the labor market. And what we actually have seen in general, actually, after the COVID, and we also did a study, and this was also again in Malaysia, is that we saw that women more so than before fell out from the labor market. And if they remained in the labor market, they more so started to work around home-based, for example, enterprises and so on. So I think it's a bit early to be conclusive to say what the COVID has led to in terms of impact, but just to assure you that we are looking and monitoring very closely on what we see coming out in terms of possible trends and challenges, but also then looking at the opportunity side. How can we strengthen women's economic empowerment? What is it exactly that we need to do? So even on this front, we look forward to hear your suggestions, and I also took note on some good suggestions, and we will of course work to support the government and in partnership with our UN sisters and brothers. So these are some of the feature, and unfortunately, and I think you are aware that due to the pandemic, we really did see a rise in the so-called shadow pandemic, which was a rise in gender-based violence, and especially during the lockdown phases, with a lot of stressors and a new heavy burden on women coming out of increased also unpaid work and care work that women traditionally in many societies are to provide. And that also then increased as per the COVID pandemic. So now we are going to be looking for building back better. So how can we build back for more inclusive societies where definitely girls, women have equal opportunity, and what can we do to support these good changes that need to take place? So again, we are very glad to hear your suggestions, and it was really great that you brought this out. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Dr. Osa. Yeah, so as I mentioned previously, we are definitely running out of time, but we are deciding to actually extend it for a bit. So just to answer some question on the floor, right? So let's start with the first question from the floor, particularly. It's a very interesting question, which I think I would like to address to Mr. Reynold, right? But Nicole or Ralph, if you want to step in after that, feel free to do so. But the question is, are we seeing lack of youth competence that actually prompts us to, having all this empowerment and encouragement of youth, right? So what's your opinion on that kind of aspect? Right? Is it because youth you see youth as a bit of like lack competency, or is it more like, there's other reasons for you to want to promote youth empowerment and encouragement? So Mr. Rehmat, if I may invite you to answer this very interesting question.
Thanks, Dale. Indeed, no, I don't think that's the only reason. Ultimately, when we talk, and the issue of inclusion, for example, was mentioned, right? I mean, it's no secret that a society that is going to be prosperous, that is going to be, looking forward and being able to achieve milestone after milestone, it is much easier to do so when the social contract between individuals and state, for example, when trust between all members of society is strong, right? And when there is a genuine a consensus about the direction that this society is taking, right? Now, of course, and the more diverse the society is, and this is, the reality in many countries in Southeast Asia, the more complex it becomes, because you need to involve more and more people, but also find common denominators that will allow you to build this consensus. So you can't do this if you leave people behind, right? And this notion of leaving no one behind, which is at the heart of the SDGs, really there takes all its meaning, right? So I'm glad we've talked about, the special attention we need to give to young women and girls to be also part of this. But we should also not forget, for example, youth from the ethnic minority groups, or young LGBTI, right? Or youth with disability. Right? All these groups in society who, unfortunately, there is, and it's a reality, a situation where they are very often forgotten, right? And if left alone, can't access the services, can't access the platforms unless they are given a little push. And there's really this little push that I see players like UNDP and other UN agencies and other development partners can really play in society. I don't think, and to answer very quickly to another question that is in the chat, which I think is important, I don't see any reticence from government or from the big, large multinational companies to engage with youth. But there is, there is a gap of knowledge, right? And of course, government needs to move forward, and big companies, are not going to stop and put on hold. So it's a question of facilitating this dialogue. And very often there is a genuine interest at engaging, but there's a lack of mechanisms, a lack of tools. So it's the connection, right, that needs to happen. And this is where I think, the UN flag and the UN values is extremely interesting and offers, an impartial platform where people with a genuine interest to making good, can get together without any complacency, but also without any hidden agenda, and just, for the sake of the interest of the good, and because ultimately this will be a win-win situation, right? I mean, those citizens, those young citizens, are going to be young consumers, and the more purchasing power they have, well, the better for a private sector company, or the better for a tax collecting agency in a government. So ultimately, everybody is winning when you provide opportunities for all to participate. And the other way is true too. Everybody will be losing if trust in society, if social cohesion is fragilized, and if the tensions that unfortunately we see popping up once in a while here and there, are not addressed in a sustainable way. It's not a question of just putting varnish on it and hoping it will disappear, right? If it's really going to the root causes of those tensions, and that very often have to do with inequalities of access, inequalities of opportunities, and that is a fundamental breach of the human rights agenda, and therefore a compelling reason for a UN agency to step in. Thanks.
Thanks, Mr. Reynold. So, Nico, Ralph, any further, addition? I would accept silence as no.
I can quickly come in. Yeah.
Uh-huh.
And to the question of whether there's a lack of competence, there is not. And I would like to quote Renaud when he said, there is no, Hidayat, you actually did it. You said there's always opportunity. And that's true for every individual being, in whatever situation we are. And I think it's important that individuals know their talents, know what they're good at. We're good at so many different things. And I think this is the area where we should be active in and where we should be working. Now, usually societies, governments, big companies, even embassies, we are organizations, and as such, we are stubborn. We have rules, and usually it's very difficult to change. Now, if you have new ideas, you will face these obstacles. So it's not easy to change something static, right? So in that case, there is need for push and for demands. So by being quiet and silent, of course, things will not change. On the other hand, it's also the responsibility of the people in power to listen.
Thanks, Nico. I think you wanted to add something.
Thanks. I was just thinking about this as well, and one thing I think that helps is sometimes engagement is hard, right? And especially when you're trying to engage with lots of individual voices. So where people can formalize their groups, and we can engage with groups rather than individual voices, that can often help. And once you're a formalized group, groups can then apply for sub-grants to be able to engage in activities that achieve the SDGs. We've seen that happen before, and it's a really useful tool and ways for youth to be involved in organizations.
Thanks. Okay, so maybe we just take it one last question from the floor, and then we have to close it because of the constraint of time. So this question is particularly, I would angle it more to like the youth, right? So has it been difficult to engage larger stakeholders like government agencies and MNCs to engage youth? So Mr. Reynold just now have already, share with us a bit on what these big agencies would actually feel in terms of like engaging youth, right? So it's not like they are not interested, they're very highly likely interested, but sometimes it's just because of the time or because they don't have the capacity to actually, engage with every single local youth organizations, right? But from the perspective of the youth representing your particular youth organization, maybe I can address this to any youth panelists that would like to take this question, right? Has it been difficult? And even if it's difficult, right, how successful have you been in engaging with these high entities, let it be corporates or let it be government agencies, right? So if I can get the first one to start sharing, maybe Miss, I think Jahan looks quite interested to answer, right? So maybe Jahan, if you want to share first.
Yeah, so thank you, Hidayat. And thank you for that great question in the chat. For me, because my goal of focus was on sustainable cities and thus about things such as urban planning, we had a difficult time reaching out to the ministry of the local administration here in Vietnam for urban planning for actually to actually propose our models out to these policymakers. But what I did was I circumvented that barrier and reached out to NGOs instead, such as Health Bridge, who is also an urban planning NGO working in Vietnam. So although there were certain barriers, I felt like there are still enough opportunities to collaborate with NGOs, and then from then we can better adjust it so that we can reach out to these urban planning agencies that work government.
Thanks, Tia. Any other youth panelists?
Yeah, sorry. Can I go first?
Yeah, Shirley, you can go first, and then after that will be Nika.
Yeah, I think to answer that questions, I would say it's actually pretty hard. But however, I think me and my organization in 2019, we did the same thing when I was working with the Australian youth as well, right? What we did is that we are trying to look for programs from Australian government and also ASEAN government and try to find if there's any link or like, connections between what we're currently doing with the youth in innovations to their, aim. So if we kind of like see a program that match, then we can just like reach out to them. And I think from that, it will be like really easy moving forward. I think being proactive, I think really helps whenever you find difficulties in that sense.
Yeah, true. Being proactive is actually everything, right? In terms of that allows you to step in, step up, right? I think Monica, yes, continue. Then maybe we can close off.
Yeah. Just to add, I mean, I think it's a different situations when it comes to countries, because specifically here in the Philippines, we have a specific government agency for the youth. We call it National Youth Commission. So what we did in my organization was we partnered with them, like we sent the proposal, and then we invited them instead to be like, we have this specific program, we called it Achieving Goals. It's more on focusing on the different angles such as the agriculture, the education, gender, health and equality, and even aging society. So what we did was we engaged them. We told them that, hey, we're gonna made a specific seminar and workshop here in this specific university. Maybe you can represent National Youth Commission in this specific program. So it's more on like inviting them, actually, inviting them. And I think they will be gladly more accept your invitation. I mean, well, basically it depends on their schedule, but I think if it is the program that you are proposing is really relative in, contributing to the growth of the youth, especially in the youth participation, then definitely I think it's more on, I mean, they will have a big chances, or basically the relationship between the national agency of specifically for the youth and the youth per se will grow prosperly. So yeah.
All right, so I think we can literally close it off right now because we're running really super out of time. But again, thank you to all panelists, the youth panelists, the speakers for your sharing today, right? So let us all give them a big round of virtual applause. You can applaud physically, no worries. All right, so thank you. I'll pass it over to the MC then, Bella.
Thank you. Thank you, Hidayat, for moderating the session, and thank you all speakers for the meaningful conversation. All right, let's move on. Dear members of the participants, the person who will be sharing his thoughts with us for the wrap-up session is Mr. Simone from the Good Leadership. Simone is the co-founder of Engage, a not-for-profit active in Nepal in the field of social inclusion, especially disability rights, working at the intersections between youth development and leadership. Simone is also the co-founder of the Good Leadership, a new initiative promoting positive leadership, civic engagement among youth, enhancing discussions on the most pressing issues among them. And most importantly, Simone leads for good and enjoys writing. So ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Simone.
Yeah, thank you so much, Bella, and hello, everybody. I have this daunting task of trying to summarize such a rich and diverse panel discussion. So, but let me try. First of all, I'd like to thank you, Hidayat, and all the participants, especially also the youth side of the panel, because they put a tremendous effort to be here today. So thank you so much to all of you. So we've been talking about a variety of key issue. I mean, Rolf raised the issue of climate change that is indispensable. We cannot do without that. And we also have Nicole that actually is a real expert by background and knowledge on climate change. And she brought experience from Solomon Island. We've been talking about civic engagement. Reynold explained about what UNDP in Thailand has been doing in terms of strategy to engage youth at multiple levels, including also the linkage between more active citizenship and also livelihood, income generation. And then we got, discussion, fundamental discussion about the role of young girl and women. And Dr. Oza been talking about the role of education, the role of school curricula, and we got some key example of initiative. We've been talking also about engagement in terms of civic planning. Example from Gia, we've been talking about civic education in the Philippines and so on. So now let me just try to summarize some possible building blocks for possible and desirable future conversation. So number one, it's a working process. And I think Marisa said at the beginning, it's a working process. And also Dr. Oza said that she's been consistently wondering how can we do participation and youth engagement better. Second, there are so many initiatives on the ground at the grassroots level, try to transform the Agenda 2030 into a reality. And we saw that, youth are in the driving seat. So there is so much goodwill, there is so much commitment, and there is so much leadership. Leadership is so fundamental, it's paramount. But youth want more. And I think we heard from what UNDP has been doing in Thailand on how we can meet the aspiration of the youth to do more. And because, youth actually, they deserve really to have a stronger voice. Then another building block, that there is a strong interest from the development partners to engage, to find new way, to discover new way. Reynold talked also about social innovation. Fourth, it's indispensable, investing in civic engagement. And this is all about the social contract, something that Reynold also underlined. And we saw also that it can be difficult. From the experience of Switzerland in Cambodia, how it can be difficult to provide a platform to the youth to talk and engage. We've been talking about partnership. I think a partnership is something that come out very strong. Nicole mentioned about the necessity, the urgency to bring stakeholders together. So investing in civic engagement is the way forward. We heard in the detail about the strategy of UNDP in civic engagement, and we know how civic engagement boosts participation, and participation itself enhances civic engagement. And so this is a kind of incredible transformative loop, if you want to think about it. And then, we shouldn't forget the role of volunteerism. We have in the audience also Emilia from the UMV regional office. Volunteerism for me is the engine of civic engagement, right? Volunteerism can be the stepping stone to youth in the decision making. Now, let's go back to the beginning while I'm wrapping up. We need to shift from words to action. And Nicole said it's hard, right? So engaging youth might not be even enough. Just engaging doesn't necessarily mean enabling them to be truly part of the equation. And that means about, the decision making, giving them a voice, and we need to pursue, as Reynold said, inclusive decision making process, taking consideration, youth from vulnerable communities. That is something that actually we didn't really focus too much, but we've been talking about, Reynold been talking about indigenous youth, members from LGBT communities, and also very importantly, very neglected, youth with disability. So to wrap up, we need to be consistent, persevere. It's a long journey, and we need to ensure that our passion, our commitment doesn't get deflated, but remains strong and steady. And there is so much that we can do. And I'm sure that everybody wanted to say much more, share much more, but we couldn't because of time constraints. So we hope that this is just the beginning of the conversation, and the idea that emerged from this discussion can really help moving ahead in rethinking the role of youth they can have in the society. So we saw so many incredible energies, enthusiasm, is something that also came out of this conversation. So we have to build on this energy. So thank you so much to all.
Thank you very much, Simone. Now on to the closing remarks. Mr. Surakusuma is the head of the Sub-Regional Office for Southeast Asia at UN ESCAP. He initiates work on the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development in 11 member countries in partnership with governments, international institutions, civil society, and private sector entities. He also leads the cooperation for the UN with ASEAN in the economic and social cultural areas. Prior to UN ESCAP, he managed economic development programs and delivered technical assistance in the ASEAN and the Pacific region. He has extensive experience in policy analysis, development cooperation, and regional integration in Asia and the Pacific. And it is my honor to welcome Mr. Ruhimat Surakusuma to present the closing remarks for Southeast Asia SDG Youth Dialogue, Enhance Youth Activism in Implementing 2030 Agenda on Sustainable Development. Please welcome.
Thank you, Bella. Engaging enthusiasm of a younger generation is critical, absolutely critical. For the UN's mission itself to be sustainable, many young people must be involved in our activities. They are passionate about climate action, social issues, humanitarian causes. They are moved by what is happening to the communities they live in. They are undoubtedly committed to the SDGs. The panel interaction was very engaging, and I must commend Nika, Shirley, Siripon, Metachai, and our youngest member, Jehan. Well done indeed. This is a promising group of future diplomats and SDG leaders from Southeast Asia. Our thanks go to Ms. Nicole Lowry, Bapa Ralph Stam, Dr. Osa Torkelson, and Mr. Reynold Mayer for their precious time in participating, and also for sharing their exciting work and words of wisdom. The initiatives nicely summarized by Simon are potential ways of moving forward. And of course, these include enhancing youth participation, building leadership among the youth, and also strengthening engagement and partnership. So we hope to continue the momentum that was started today. ESCAP can only facilitate as we believe the best agenda for the youth is one developed by the youth. The proceedings of this event will be part of the 2022 APFSD report. It will be part of the youth movement in Southeast Asia for the high-level policy forum. Furthermore, ESCAP, along with other UN agencies, is tasked to implement our common agenda, which comprises collaborations with various entities and stakeholders. One of the key components is succeeding generation shaping future, which offers to involve the youth in terms of the work of the UN in areas that include the general topic of sustainable development, but also in the fields of education, digitalization, and planning. All of these areas were identified by the youth in this panel. May I also take this opportunity to inform of the Economic and Social Council, or ECOSOC, Youth Forum entitled COVID-19 Recovery, Youth Taking Action for a Sustainable Future, that will take place virtually on 19th to 20th of April 2022. The link of this is provided in the chat box, so please join us. The forum has established itself as the largest gathering of young people at the UN, bringing their views, ideas, and innovations to the policy discussions that matter to them. In closing, may we express appreciation to Hidayat, our moderator, Simon, and his team for their diligent work in putting this event together. So we look forward to our next endeavor with our partners in building the youth movement in Southeast Asia and strengthening their cause in the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Rihimat Surakusuma, for the closing remarks. So, ladies and gentlemen, we have come to the end of the event. I would like to thank everyone for joining us today. Thank you all speakers and all distinguished guests for sharing your voice and thoughts with all of us. Let us all look forward for more impactful youth contribution in the society for a better world in the near future. Thank you once again. It has been a wonderful and insightful session. I'd like to once again remind you regarding the survey link. We would really appreciate if you could share feedback so we can take note for better things that are coming up. Thank you very much. I'm Bella. Thank you for having me. See you when I see you. Stay safe and healthy, everyone. See ya. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye-bye. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Ronnie. Thank you, everybody. Thank you, Nicole.
Happy
Thank you so
weekend.
much.
Thank you, everyone. It was really, really great session.
Thank you.